in the time after King Arthur. Walk, don't ride. The Cornish coast is famous for its climate, for it is so much gentler than the rest of Britain, soft and sunny even in winter, and with sea mists in spring and fall, and a site of megalithic monuments from far earlier times, a place where armor could be worn with ease and even some comfort in the cool weather. It was the home and seat of King Arthur, and now to our own King Perceval. These are the lands that inspired the English writers as they walked the countryside, and they were all walkers. Their poetry and flowing prose remain our common heritage, as does the land. We can know both when we walk. To walk is to cure all ills, both mental and physical. Cornwall, the peninsula pointing westward into the Atlantic, so inviting to friend and foe alike, as we shall see. And we'll do some walking too. A few years have passed in Perceval's time, for which we have no records. There are gaps in the medieval chronicles, and some of the stories are missing altogether for this time period. However, some fragments of the chronicles remain, and I will use these as best I can to reconstruct the events of a mostly happy period. The chronicles begin again in earnest during wartime, don't they always? A war the likes of which this almanac has not yet seen. But we get ahead of ourselves. This is what we can deduce from the small scraps and legends handed down by word of mouth in royal families. 1. Perceval solidified his reign and began to build up Wales's defenses, but by no means were they adequate, due to the continuing shortage of able-bodied men. Rebuilding of Camelot began. 2. The period was nationally quiet and peaceful, and the king continued to know the young born-again wayfarer privately. A Viking invasion force was massing, preparing to invade Britain at the worst possible time, when the men could not be spared from the harvest, and when the upcoming winter weather would favor the cold-hearted Norsemen, when help was far away, when Celtic men's hearts were happy and thus not prepared for war, that is, when the invasion was most likely to succeed. So it is still summer, in fact midsummer, but some years have passed for Perceval and for his scribe as well. We can assume that the missing years were pivotal and well spent. Some forts were built, repaired, or begun. Meager armies trained a bit better. Romance continued with the young wayfarer, one that both knew could never last, but enjoyed anyway. A peace would be broken as the final enemy appears. Yes, finally this almanac must speak of war, although we have managed to avoid it so far. But first we must make the transition from happy times to a somewhat more desperate period. The centuries have formed the body for walking and moving, not just for sitting around. Walking seems to give more than it takes. To walk is almost to float along, having achieved a balance between forward momentum on the one foot and gravity on the other. It is as easy as falling forward. It is hardly possible to walk without some stimulus to thought. The very movement seems to stir the mind into action and to loosen ideas, giving them a chance to rub against each other and mingle. As hostility and other interfering emotions fade away, all solutions soon become crystal clear. The king now did most of his thinking on his feet, and as we readers walk, our muscles literally milk the blood back to our hearts and to our every extremity. Our body and mind tingle with alertness. Whenever the king was sad or mad, he would set out to walk the feelings into resolution, to gain new perspectives, to know the real world firsthand, not secondhand. And so the king announced today that he would again walk down to the training field to look in on Gawain's military exercises. However, a new squire heard this, and not knowing the king's walking habits, made the mistake of offering to fetch the king's horse or carriage.
Your Majesty, shall I fetch your horse or carriage for the journey? On the way to the training field this morning on the footpath, there were the merry songs of the titmouse, song sparrows tuning up on the alder bushes, a gurgling brook with its fresh-smelling loam, lichen wet with the year's last dew, long shafts of early light, pigeons flashing white wings and fine toadstools. Had I taken my carriage and ridden down to the field, I should have had only a fleeting glimpse or none of all these fine sights. Above the noise of the wheels or the pounding of the hoof beats, how could I have heard the sea dirge of the pines? True, I could have saved about 20 minutes of my priceless time, but for what? For the sake of a more sluggish digestion, of a wider girth beneath my belt, duller thoughts in my head, a posture grown by that much older. For this I should waste a fresh and living experience. Time is a replacement for barter beads. Time is an opportunity to live before you die. So a man who walks and lives and sees and thinks as he walks has indeed lengthened his life by that experience. For the time will come when the winter will ask you, "What were you doing all the summer?"